Hello and welcome to this episode of RPGGamer Top 5s, and this time we're going to do the top 5 tabletop RPGs. So, let's be honest, this is a controversial one. While everyone's got their favourite video games on different consoles, most people can respect other opinions. But with tabletop RPGs, people invest serious amounts of time and effort into their chosen game, writing character backgrounds, shaping the worlds, making content. So this is a more personal decision. Now, we could just list our favourite RPGs, which to tell the truth wouldn't match up with the list we're about to run down. But if we did that, it'd attract a lot of criticism, as there's only so many times we can rave about Star Wars D6, and that would just be our personal opinion anyway. So what we did was arranged a poll on one of the larger polling sites, and then we waited. And a few long weeks later we got the results, the quantity of which blew us away. We got back a list of over 100 different RPGs, and tens of thousands of votes cast, which was amazing. So after a bit of processing to account for different editions of RPGs, and some reading, as a bunch of the games we'd never even heard of, we assembled this list. The contents of which didn't really surprise us, but we certainly didn't expect them in this order. But enough of me waffling on with the countdown. At number 5, Vampire the Masquerade, with 4,368 votes. Released in 1991 by White Wolf Publishing, this is the game that started off their fantastically popular World of Darkness setting. Vampire had perhaps one of the most successful lives of an RPG, not only having a collectible card game based on it, but didn't every 90s RPG, but also video games and even a television series, the short-lived Kindred the Embraced. While personally I prefer Werewolf as a more playable game in the World of Darkness, Vampire got the series off to a magnificent start, with a brilliant backstory to get your teeth into. Vampire was also one of the first RPGs to have an appeal outside the core gamer community, with its dark setting appealing to the goth community amongst others, who connected with the tragic doomed nature of the characters and the gothic fantasy setting. At number 4, Star Wars the role-playing game, with 4,717 votes. Now, some might see this as a bit of a fix, as it's well known that I'm a massive Star Wars RPG fan, and combining the votes for the 3 different RPGs to have carried the Star Wars license definitely helped it out. But Star Wars has been the staple of the RPG scene since the first edition was released in 1987 by West End Games. The West End Games title really helped Star Wars out as well, as it provided a source of material for the newly created expanded universe, with rulebooks actually being sent out to authors to help them with the background information and the tone of the universe. And with some of the people behind the game now helping to create the different Star Wars animated series, such as Pablo Hidalgo, the RPG community is fed back into the source material as well as building games from it. After West End Games lost the license, Wizards of the Coast also had a couple of attempts at Star Wars, with the D20 version acting very much like Dungeons & Dragons in space, with some magnificent sourcebooks in the prequel era, before they in turn lost the license. Most recently, Fantasy Flight Games have released their trilogy of Star Wars games, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion and Force and Destiny, along with a Force Awakens beginner's game, taking the game up to date with their own rule system, which is more about the players helping make the story than the games master just directing play, and Star Wars remains popular and accessible to this day. At number 3, Call of Cthulhu, with 5,668 votes. First released in 1981 by Chaosium, Call of Cthulhu is based on the Cthulhu mythos stories of the author Howard Phillips Lovecraft. Now up to its 7th edition, Call of Cthulhu has a number of settings, but its classic one is the 1920s, with investigators seeking out eldritch horrors and cultists set on the destruction or enslavement of mankind. More so than any other RPG, player characters in Cthulhu tend to have short lives, as not only do they stand a high chance of meeting one of a massive variety of gruesome deaths at the hands of monsters that man was not supposed to know, but also the reality of humanity existing in a universe filled with unspeakable and hostile creatures leads to their fragile grasp on sanity being shattered, and them spending the end of their days clawing at the walls of a sanitarium. While Cthulhu has settings from medieval to science fiction, with modern day proving popular, the classic 1920s setting, with suited investigators clutching their revolvers and flashlights as they peer into the dark corners of the earth in an age of flappers and gangsters and a slightly more innocent age before the horrors of the Second World War, proves evocative and delightful to play in. At number 2, Pathfinder, with 8,326 votes. Now this is a game I've personally never played. although obviously I was aware of it making some real movement in the RPG community. Pathfinder was published in 2009 by Paizo Publishing, extending and modifying the system reference document based on the revised 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons game, published under the Open Game License OGL, and is intended to be backwardly compatible with that edition. Pathfinder was published as a response to the extensive changes of Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, which split the gaming community, and proved so successful that it outsold Dungeons & Dragons in Spring 2011, Fall 2012, Spring 2013, Fall 2014 and Summer 2014, which given D&D's status is remarkable. Providing a classic version of fantasy role-playing, Pathfinder has a 2nd edition released in 2019, which has been met with some spectacular reviews. Notable mention, Shadowrun, with 2,852 votes. Now, with over 100 different results, we really shouldn't have included a notable mention section, unless it was going to contain 95 other games. But we had to make an exception for Shadowrun, as it was the only other game to get over 1,000 votes in the poll. A fantasy cyberpunk game first published in 1989 by Fazer, and is now in its 6th edition. Shadowrun has magic returned to the world of the 2050s, with elves, dwarves, orcs, trolls and dragons side by side with cybernetic enhancements and computer technology. Rather than having a Tolkien-esque world having reached a cyberpunk level of technology, Shadowrun instead has taken our world, but changed it with the return of magic, allowing modern cities and settings to be used, making the game world far more familiar than a fantasy one. And at number 1, Dungeons & Dragons, with 15,815 votes. Well, it kinda had to be, didn't it? Winning by an absolute landslide, it's the game which launched the hobby. First published by Tactical Studies Review, TSR, in 1974, and now up to its 5th edition, although we don't talk about the 4th edition because no one seems to like that one. Dungeons & Dragons is a standard fantasy RPG. Originally designed to use a classic Tolkien world of elves, dwarves and halflings, D&D has grown to use far more races these days, and has a variety of settings, from the standard fantasy fare of the Forgotten Realms and Eberron, to more interesting ones such as Darksun, Spelljammer and Planescape. The classic 3 books of the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide and Monster Manual has graced the tabletop of so many groups, and the game is so popular that it virtually eclipses the rest of the hobby put together. But does it deserve that status? Well, to be honest, yes. D&D remains a whole load of fun. Without some of the more modern innovations to aid in shaping your stories, D&D remains accessible and easy to play, with most people in the hobby being introduced through a game of D&D. So, not only did Dungeons & Dragons get the most votes, but it's a worthy winner, and a champion of the RPG hobby which we can all be proud of. Well, that's it for our top 5 tabletop RPGs. What did you think? Are these going to remain the most popular RPGs if we redo this list in 10 years? Or is there something on the horizon which will eclipse these, springing onto the scene much as Pathfinder has in the last 10? Let us know in the comments below, or by getting in touch through email or the website. So, as always, many thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like what we're doing, but most of all, you look after yourselves, and we'll catch you later. Bye!